Right, so two competing narratives there, one that we hear in schools or in our sort of government, and one that we hear in our popular culture, okay? Uh, and so what do scientists actually do, right? Sort of asking the questions here. And here's where they start to sort of give an alternative history to science, right? So uh, talking about some of the bad things that science has done over the years, right? So experiments of unsuspecting populations, etc. Um, right, and so it's questioning the idea of scientific objectivity, scientific neutrality, scientific method, scientific rationality, right, which all tend to be sort of conversation enders, right? They tend to be, if things where we're like, oh, if that's going on, then there's no need to question things. So philosophy of science does question these aspects, right? So it goes into definitions of science here, right? And here we have some alternative definitions of science. So feminist perspective, saying that science is sexist and chauvinist enterprise that promotes the values of white middle-class males, right? So usually don't hear that type of definition um, for science, okay? And then other notions of the golem of science, okay? Science is like a religion in America. Science is a theology of violence, right? So again, all things that were generally, uh, that we don't hear articulated, but which come up uh, when we talk about science and when we talk about Darwin, right? So, we need to get these things out. We need to understand what the critiques and the skepticisms and the doubts are in order to have a full conversation about science, right? And so the text goes on to look at, basic, you know, putting forth the basic argument of philosophy of science, right? It goes through here. And then what it does here is it gives a very short history of science, which is good, right? It reminds you of all the things you really need to know, the scientific revolutions you need to know. You've probably heard these things over the years, but it's always good to keep in mind, right? Goes over the major players, right? And then it starts to, here we have it talks about Darwin and the Darwinian Revolution. Um, and then what it'll do is, after it gets over sort of the standard notion of the history of science, it'll go into this the alternative history of science.